It's time for us to head over to Japan and to our man in Japan for his latest dispatch. Here's Eoin Sheahan. Eoin, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ger. How are things? How are you, Michael?
Where are you, Eoin?
I'm in Disneyland, Ger. I didn't even know there was a Disneyland until I started taking trains out to Ireland training in Chiba, which is just east of Tokyo City. So you take a train east and the train is traditionally full, especially on the weekends, and then everybody gets off and goes to Disneyland while we continue on into the inner sanctum of Chiba, where the Ireland's team hotel is located. So Ireland's team duties today were pretty low-key. We had the Ruddock brothers, Kieran and Rhys Ruddock, doing media in Chiba. So I wasn't at a loose end afterwards. We could have gone and done some tourism or something in Tokyo City Centre, but all the accredited media here have a list of all the press conferences that are going on, and I saw that the Springboks were on in their hotel, the Hilton, which was pretty close by to the Ireland team hotel in Chiba. So I got a train out to towards the Hilton, and my Google Maps says change to the Disney line. I was like, Disney line? Oh, that's pretty cute. It's named after the theme park that is nearby. And then the train pulls up, and the windows are made out of Mickey Mouse faces. The handles that you hold onto are made out of Mickey Mouse faces. There is this emotional Disney soundtrack playing everywhere you go. You feel like you are a dwarf about to save Sleeping Beauty from a giant, but instead what you are doing is going to a South Africa rugby press conference.
Okay, there's a metaphor there somewhere, but I'm not sure what it is.
No, there's no metaphor there. Just you guys kind of nostalgic and emotional, and you remember when Disney films were on loop in your childhood. That's what this whole place is bringing back memories of. The castle is right over there, but I'd have to pay in to give you a good shot of that. This is the Disneyland Hotel, and there is a beautiful shrub sculpture of Mickey Mouse right over my left shoulder.
I can see that. It's amazing. So we'll come back to Disney. There is definitely a metaphor. You were at the South African Media Day. Who was there? What were the questions? And obviously South Africa, bit of a big story at the moment.
Yeah, so they did press yesterday and couldn't quite make it. It was just a bit too tight to the Ireland one. So I said I better get an opportunity to go down today, especially because there was a coach speaking today. It was just players yesterday. So you had Matt Proudfoot, who was an assistant coach with the Springboks. He's their forwards coach. He was speaking, but he was flanked by Damien de Land, and you also had Frans Malherbe on the other side of him. So you'll have de Land on the left and Malherbe on the right when we're watching this clip coming up. So the press conference, it's interesting actually, going to a South Africa one, because I've only been to Ireland press conferences and South Africa press conferences. You've got to hand it to the South African press officer. There's no control on the sort of questions. He let it run for 20-25 minutes. It went long, and it was the same with the embargoed copy afterwards. So the press officer wasn't trying to put a halt to any sort of question, so we could ask away. And I went, and I guess after the discussion that's been had, especially in Irish media over the last couple of days, I just wanted to get a couple of questions in about doping in South Africa, not necessarily the Springboks, but in South African rugby overall.
Eoin Sheahan from Off the Ball in Dublin. How are things?
Very well, thank you. And yourself?
Very well. So there's been a lot written in Irish media over the last couple of days about rugby and drugs in rugby, and a question for you as somebody who's worked in the Northern Hemisphere. It's kind of a two-pronged question. We've had to ask hard questions in Ireland of underage players in schools as well. Does rugby have a doping issue, and does South African rugby have a doping issue?
I think I'm a forwards coach, mate. That's something for administrators to answer on. I wouldn't have to be able to answer that question. I don't have the information to answer that question. If you ask me something about the game specifically, I could answer that. But that's for administrators.
Are you concerned at all about the image of South African rugby?
I think the image of South African rugby is portrayed about what you see on the field. We're competitive. We're a competitive nation. If you look at from our sevens team, how well they're competing on the world stage. Our junior side third in the world championships, junior championships. The Springboks competing well. The women's team qualifying. So I think that's the image of South African rugby that needs to be attained. I think if from a sports spectator point of view, of course, doping in sport is something that continually needs, not just rugby, continually needs to be addressed on a worldwide platform. So to talk about it from an assistant coach position, I don't think it's my role to speak about.
But I mean, at your level, at this level of the game, I don't know what happens at school level, but at your level of the game, people are tested anyway. So surely it shouldn't be.
We are tested. weekly, and the players can test to it. Probably most off days, probably 6 to 8 players on an off day basis would be tested every week from prior to every one of our camps that we've been on, right the way through the Rugby Championship into our preparation. Every Wednesday or Thursday of our off week, 6 to 8 players would be tested on a weekly basis.
That's an interesting point, because ultimately if you do have a failed test, it shows that testing is working. I'm not sure if that's something you go along with. It's kind of, that's arguable, I guess. Like, do you think that testing is working? And I guess on a local level and on an international level,
it has to be working. I think that's what world sport attains. I mean, it's been proven in athletics the way the Russian Federation was, the testing is the only viable mechanism to ensure clean sport. So.
But Gavin Cumsky from the Irish Times.
Sorry, I couldn't get your name.
Sorry, Gavin Cumsky from the Irish Times.
Hi, Gavin.
But do you understand the narrative? Because even if you look at what happened with Craven Week and all that, we just haven't seen anywhere else in the world that there's positive tests of teenage kids. Now, granted, teenagers aren't being tested as rigorously in other countries, but do you understand why this narrative keeps coming back?
I understand why the narrative is there. I'm just saying I'm not the most. I don't have that data to be able to comment on that. If you ask me on something about scrums and lineouts and the play game against New Zealand, I could comment on that. But I'm not someone who gathers data on that. We have a serious medical team in place in South African rugby that monitors that. Serious testing is done of this team, and that's a team I'm responsible for.
France, talking about this, Saturday whether weather conditions could be quite slippery.
So the next question there is about weather, Owen, is that right?
Yeah, that's it about the scrum and the weather. Just to kind of clarify that is the full doping section. There was nothing else in the press conference at all about doping. So that's it. They did change the subject pretty quickly after that. Yeah,
they've been writing it up in the South African media, though. I'm looking at one of the South African rugby magazines online, and they're saying that Matt Proudfoot has defended the reputation of South African rugby, which he didn't really do, did he? He kind of... He's like, look, I'm not going to talk about this, but if you look at our reputation, it's we're competitors. We're just competitors. So, is it a bit of a cop out for everybody, or is that how rugby treats this? That everybody at that level in rugby is going to go, you'd want to talk to the rugby union of whatever country that I'm employed by, because that's the stuff that they handle.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. That's kind of why I kind of framed the question like that in the first place. I didn't want this to come across to him that you're the bad guys here. This is the only country in the world that has issues. I actually would have been very interested to hear his overall take on whether or not it is hugely incentivized for young rugby players. We're talking schools rugby players here to take performance-enhancing drugs to make it in the game. We've got a more physical game than we've ever had in the past. So I think that case is true, and maybe he could have made that point. Like, I think the point he makes about testing worky or not, I personally disagree with him, but I think he's fair enough in that opinion, and some people might agree with him on that opinion. But I do think it is a bit of a cop-out to not actually kind of respond to the question in a more solid way, to kind of step away from it, because what is actually happening here, and kind of it was just my second question there, is that the image of South Africa is now being affected, and you're certainly not doing anything to help that if you are sidestepping the question. Yeah, no, exactly. So it's the main story on SA Rugby Mag on their website at the minute. Proudfoot defends South African rugby image. It's not as if the most recent test wasn't close to the South African rugby team. Like, it's very close. It's really close. That's why this is now quite a big issue. For sure. Like, the hook here is South Africa. The hook here is a South African player failing a drugs test. The B sample coming back, and he still failed the drugs test. Like, you would have expected that if you'd asked specifically about that situation, he would have come back with an answer about the fact that this is still going down the courts. There could be an appeal. It'll go to the CAS, whatever. So there's no point really getting into that specific case. But make no bones about it, the reason why we're talking about this is because of that specific case in South Africa. And you got to say fair play to Alan Quinlan in his article on Saturday as well, and bringing this back up right before the Rugby World Cup, because it is quite easy for us to sidestep this and just kind of get lost in this amazing city and this amazing country and enjoy the amazing rugby that is going to be on show over the next couple of weeks. But really, beneath it all, there is probably a big issue that has been turned a blind eye to for quite some time. Yeah, well, look, it'll be interesting to see if that story disappears as soon as the actual stuff gets back out in the pitch, because frequently that's what happens. We get into tournament mode and it just slips off the news agenda unless somebody else tests positive. But sure, we know no one's ever going to test positive at the World Cup, because that just never happens. The Irish press conference today, what was the story with that? So you had Rhys Ruddock and Kieran Ruddock up for media today. which is really interesting, actually. There was a lot of good colour there. They spoke about their relationship with their father, how important he was in their upbringing, about having a Welsh accent and being accepted by people in Ireland, and the sort of brotherly nature that they now have within the Ireland camp. So Ciarán, obviously, for anybody who would have missed it, last November was brought in as part of the SNC team, working with Jason McGahan and Irish Rugby, and that's where he wants to stay. He said during the press conference that he wants to focus on that area of things in his rugby career from now on. He did mention he would like to get back on the pitch in some shape or form, probably with club rugby before his career is out. But it was a really entertaining press conference, and the full thing is available up on Off the Ball's YouTube page.
Okay, I didn't realise that. How close is the chat that Reece might start? Is he matchday squads? Like, where is he in the pecking order in the power rankings at the minute?
The power rankings around that, I think it's... Did we reach consensus last week when we were doing this, that it was going to be Standard, that it was going to be Van der Fleer, and that it was going to be O'Mahony? If you want to make any sort of deviation around that, it's Jack Honan who is a deviation rather than Rhys Ruddock. But he is certainly fifth man up. If we're doing a power ranking of back row forwards at the moment, Rhys Ruddock is number 5 here, right?
Tadhg Beirne? I don't know.
Tadhg Beirne, yeah, that's second row, back row. Potentially, but Rhys Ruddock for sure. When it becomes the midweek games, Rhys Ruddock is almost number 1. He is a banker to captain Ireland on those occasions, let alone start those games. So a lot of people have said that's what he's there for, but you'd imagine that his talents go a little bit beyond just captaining Ireland to play Samoa and Russia, that he could be in with a shout of making the matchday squad. In terms of other news then, today, obviously Rob Kearney and his fitness was a story that emerged overnight regarding his availability for this weekend's game against Scotland in Yokohama. The Irish press officer, David O'Sheahan, kind of played down those rumours this morning, or those reports I should say, this morning, that he will be assessed today. It's a day off. Ireland are in training today, and tomorrow they look to try and get him back into training. So he is still a live option for the weekend, but fitness pending. Robbie Henshaw, it's looking like it's 90% certain at this point he will not be available this week, but it was specifically mentioned that they will be targeting Japan for him to make a return for, which is pretty interesting if the severity of the hamstring injury was to be believed from the initial report. You've got Joey Carberry, who's back to full training at this point as well, and Keith Earls was running fully yesterday. So outside of the Rob Kearney news, I think there's probably a silver lining to all the other injury clouds.
Okay, so you expect Keith Earls to be available for selection this weekend, for Joey Carberry to be available for selection this weekend if needs be?
Yeah, but as Rory O'Connor was saying on Monday Night Rugby last night, there's a difference between that and then actually having played a lot of test minutes over the last couple of weeks, which is something that Keith Earls hasn't really got under his belt. You probably start a fully fit Keith Earls regardless of the amount of test minutes he's got. And if Joe Schmidt feels that he's got a full week of training, like he was training yesterday, and we all know that Schmidt likes his players to have a full week. If you're getting back on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday, it's not good enough for a Schmidt team. But Earls getting back on a Monday, that could be key for him to start this weekend in Yokohama.
Do you know that Joey Carberry start training this week, earlier in the week?
He was, yes. He was back to training yesterday as well. So Earls and Carberry both started this week off. So in terms of getting a full week from Monday through to Saturday in this situation, both Keith Earls and Joey Carberry are on track to give a full account of themselves going into the weekend. So I would not be surprised whatsoever to see Joey Carberry on the bench this weekend.
All right.